if she drops off,
If you
then
need to finish up,
do I just continue talking to us?
yeah.
Okay.
No one else will know.
I'm presenting the Michael, apparently.
Hey, you wanted to make sure everyone's up to speed. You're trying to get some extra people involved. Perfect way to do it.
All right. All right. Yeah, I guess since we're 6 minutes in, this will probably take more than 24 minutes, but I will go fast as I can. Yeah, we may gloss over a lot of stuff. Considering nobody was here, I'm assuming most teams all know this content then already. So let's dive in. Rob, whenever you're ready.
All right.
You want to
Well,
announce the
Shanoa,
team or
in
you know the
case you
team?
don't, Shanoa, in case you don't know, hi, I'm Rob Cannon. I'm the project manager for FNL. Connie Engberg is our support assistant. She'll be pinging you for any documents that you might be missing. For our tech team, Frank is our Tripoli uh, guide, and he also helps make sure our rockets are all safe come launch weekend. And then Mark is our resident gateway lead. So we have another person brought in. Brittany, you may know her from last year, but she's switched from being a judge to now taking over the moon competition. Right. Right. And then
Yeah, I could take it from here. All right, so webinar overview. So we're basically going to talk about, even though the webinar is project management, which is the second half of this presentation, we just want to discuss some challenge overview and expectations in the first half of the presentation that kind of feeds into the project management side. So yeah, let's dive in. All right, so the challenge overview, right? So Gateway Challenge is, of course, 1 semester introduction to rocketry. It's a stepping stone to Moon and Mars. So think of it that way. Some teams have continuously been in the Gateway or they stay in the Gateway. We kind of hope that Gateway teams move on to a harder challenge in progressive years. So, Gateways to teach you the basics about rocketry, kind of get you spooled up to do Moon and Mars, which is more about the engineering than it is about the rocketry. So Gateway here on this presentation will introduce project management concepts, and we'll talk about some project management work that you need to do over the course of the Gateway Challenge. Next. Another important thing here. So basically, the first thing you're going to do or what you're going to look at in the Gateway Challenge is a kit motor selection. So the Gateway Challenge will require you to select one of 3 rocketry kits, and you'll find these rocketry kits are in the Gateway Competition Handbook, Appendix A2. You'll also need to be required to select one of 2 motors for each kit. So each kit has 2 motors. There's 3 kits. That's 6 possible motor kit combinations that you need to examine. And then you're also required to use RockSim simulation software to run simulations on those 6 combinations. So first thing is, of course, suggest is get familiar with the handbook, figure out what the kits are, what we've offered, figure out what the motors are. Procure, download RockSim, get familiar with the RockSim. Many of the Gateway teams already have RockSim or someone on the team who knows how to run RockSim. And then start running those simulations of those 6 kits. Appendix D3 of the handbook will also provide some RockSim guidance. Next. So just furthering here, some more discussion about kit motor selections. So this is just kind of a screenshot of Appendix A1 and Appendix A2 of the competition handbooks, where you can find that information. Next. And then kit selection, just, there are numerous kit manufacturers in rocketry. So don't just think that the 3 kits we offer are the only 3 kits out there. We do select Lock Precision kits. But again, don't just think that Lock Precision is the only rocketry manufacturer out there. As you move on to Moon Mars, you get more rocketry experience, you'll see that there's, a handful of rocketry kits and manufacturers out there that you can choose from. So for this year, the 2025 Gateway Challenge, with 3 kit options: the Phantom, the Patriot, and the Lock 4. So those links there, I think this website, this PowerPoint will be posted on the website, and those links will be active for you to click on. And you can also get the information in the competition handbook. Also note that you'll need to add an avionics bay component to many of these kits, and we'll look at the information here in the following screens how to do that. And you also need to do that. You need to do that both in simulation. Make sure that your simulation has an avionics bay, and in procurement. So make sure that you click the option to purchase the optional avionics bay for the kit that you select. And by doing this, you're going to turn your single deploy kit into a dual deploy kit. And we'll talk a bit about the difference between single and dual deploy. Next. So kit selection. So here's just one of the kits. Here's the Lock 4. You can see the screenshots from the vendor website. It was the last kit example on the previous page. And as you scroll through the website, you're looking at this kit, and maybe this is the one you want to select. You're going to notice 2 things on the screen there, and I kind of zoomed in on the right side of the screen and highlighted 2 particular facts. Notice that the electronics bay is included with this rocket. So there's nothing optional you need to buy, nothing optional you need to select. If you purchase this kit, it will come with the avionics bay, also called the electronics bay. And then a little further down on the screen, you'll see that the RockSim file is attached also you can download it from the vendor website for this rocket. Next. Just a shot of an avionics bay, what it looks like, what to expect. It's kind of just a sled. It's a component that sits in the middle of the rocket and houses your electronics. Your altimeters, GPS, batteries, switches, and whatnot will go inside of this component sitting on that sled. Next. All right, so single versus dual. We mentioned turning a single into a dual. So single basic kits, L1 kits, are designed with a single parachute. And that's why they're called single deploy. Advanced kits, usually level 2 or higher, have 2 parachutes, and they're called dual deploy. Usually when a rocket has 2 parachutes or a dual deploy configuration, it also uses electronics or altimeters for parachute ejection. You'll have a drogue parachute, which is deployed at the top, or the apogee, and you'll have a larger main parachute, which is deployed at a lower altitude. So just so you know why we use dual deploy, the Moon and the Mars, especially the more advanced competitions, always use a dual deploy configuration. They allow you to go higher. They allow you much more capability, versatility in your rockets. So because we're trying to, be consistent across all divisions, we also want the Gateway to use the dual deploy configuration. And just a disclaimer to note, some of you in Gateway, some of you new to rocketry may have taken our L2L workshop. That teaches you a single deploy configuration. So do not confuse what you learn in workshop as a single deploy to what you're going to use in competition. Single deploy is kind of just the baby steps to get you built up to the dual deploys that we use in competition. Next. I think we just have some screenshots here of RockSim showing single and dual, the difference. So again, when you download your RockSim, just examine the RockSim file, and if it has 1 parachute or 1 rectangle with a P, that's a single deploy. And if the image on the bottom there has 2 parachutes, so you can see the 2 rectangles with the P's means it has 2 parachutes. That means it's configured for dual deploy. And notice it also has the avionics bay in the lower image as well. A little narrow band in the middle of the rocket there between the 2 parachutes tells you that's a avionics bay with bulkheads. And we saw an image of that avionics bay a little earlier, so hopefully you can make that connection between what it physically looks like and what it looks like in simulation. Next. So just more about avionics bay for dual. This is kind of just reiterating. Many kits you see online will be single deploy, and you can convert them to dual deploy just by purchasing that extra additional component. So beware, many Gateway teams, especially the teams new to rocketry, have made this mistake. They forgot to purchase the avionics bay, or they forgot to convert to dual deploy. So we don't want you scrambling at the end of the competition or towards launch weekend trying to purchase these extra components. So just be mindful to get those early and plan for those early. Next. I think we have some. All right, so challenge handbook. For primary source of expectations and guidance is the Gateway Competition Handbook. So hopefully you've reviewed that. I believe it probably sent a link in your acceptance letter, your award letter. If you're here today, it probably means you've perused the website and you kind of know what you're getting into. You know where to find the Gateway Competition Handbook. Secondary sources of information, of course, are the Advisor Handbook, which is also on the website, and the WSGC FNL website itself for information. The Moon Mars handbooks are also on the website. You can peruse those for reference. It's much of the same information, only the expectations are much greater for Moon Mars teams. So they have to do a lot more written reports, a lot more requirements and testing and things like that. Next. Milestones. So how do we achieve our objective? So you starting off, we did kick off last week. Our end goal, right, is going to be get to launch weekend. We're going to fly some rockets in end of April. In between now and then, we have a few milestones, what we call milestones, CDR and FR. CDR is coming up here in a couple weeks. FR is in March. And they're incremental points where the project should meet partial objectives before proceeding to the next milestone. And milestones are something we use in engineering as well. So when we're developing a product, a rocket, an airplane, or a missile or whatnot, engineers also use milestones. We'll do concept, we'll do preliminary design, we'll do critical design up into flight readiness as well. So your milestones for Gateway this year, they kind of coincide with Moon Mars milestones. And you can see them written on the screen there. I'm not going to go through them. The first one in particular is January 26th. So it's coming up in about 2 weeks. You're going to present some things and we'll discuss what you need to have prepared for that milestone in the coming slides. Flight readiness is March 17th, and then competition launches April 26th. And there's a couple of intermediate reviews in between those to make sure you're on track. Every couple of weeks, we try and have a review session with you guys to make sure you're purchasing the right thing, simulating the right thing, you understand what you're doing and how to do it. Next. All right, so data submissions at the milestone. So at each milestone, you will submit a RockSim file and a fly sheet. At each milestone, you will also give a virtual presentation. So January 27th timeframe, be prepared to submit a RockSim, submit a fly sheet, and complete your virtual presentation. And we'll talk more about those in coming slides next. So RockSim. So we won't cover too much. There's a couple slides here just pointing to where to go for RockSim. Guidance how to procure RockSim is in your acceptance letter. You can install and use a 30-day RockSim trial. And all the highlighted text, these are links to kind of, information to help you procure and learn RockSim. We have some guidance tips in our handbook, competition handbook. The FNL website, the webinars also we have a webinar we do every fall for RockSim. There's also an FNL rocketry video series about RockSim. I think there's a 10 or 50 minute video about RockSim. And then of course there's RockSim support on their website at Apogee Components. So FNL, we don't make RockSim. A company called Apogee Components makes it, distributes it. They of course have tons of resources to help you learn and figure that out. So please go and do that. That should be your homework for the next couple weeks. Everyone on the team, every student should be learning how to use RockSim, and the advisors and mentors should be helping the students procure those RockSim licenses and software. And basically, RockSim is going to help you understand the flight performance of your flight vehicle prior to launch. Next. So here's just a screenshot of the RockSim. I think this is version 10. There's also a version 11 that came out, V11. Just kind of showing you a basic interface. Rocket at the bottom and components at top. Very similar to CAD as well. If your students know CAD design, even in engineering, for example, the CAD design has the tree kind of up in the upper left, and then your image that you're working on down in the bottom. Next. So kit motor, right? When you download the RockSim, like we saw in the earlier slide, right? You go to the vendor and you download that file. When you open up that file in RockSim, you may find that the kit is empty. This kit here, even though it has the 2 parachutes, we see the 2 Ps and we see the avionics bay, right? There's a few more components that go inside of the rocket that are missing from this model. So we want you to realize that usually when you open and download a RockSim file, it's not going to be complete. It's going to be maybe 60% complete. And again, that's your homework to figure out what's missing from that file to iterate every week and make improvements to your RockSim file, such that by flight readiness report, your RockSim file accurately represents what you're going to build and fly. Next. So you see here, right, like I just mentioned, your RockSim file is going to mature over time as you add components to it. And you can see the difference between the previous image and this image. There's a lot more M components, and the M's basically stand for mass. They're mass components, and they represent things like eye bolts, shock cords, parachute protectors, quick links, altimeters, batteries, switches. Oh, where are we going, Rob? So there's a lot of missing components that you'll need to add as you make these selections, right? You need to determine what goes into the rocket. So you're going to work with your rocketry mentor and figure these all out. And keep in mind that the total weight of your rocket in simulation is very important to performance. So if you're missing these from your simulation, then your performance on flight weekend is not going to match your simulation performance. Next. So just some more on RockSim simulations, right? These are the two other kits. We saw the earlier kit, right? The Phantom there on the right. You can see it gives you an option. You can click yes or no if you want to purchase the additional avionics bag. So when you go on the website, make sure to click yes for that. And if you scroll down there towards the bottom there, you also see the RockSim file you can download. The Patriot kit on the left, same thing. There's a lot of options at the top. Make sure you understand all those options. You want the kit that has the avionics bay in it. And also with the Patriot, even though it's not shown on the screen, there is a RockSim file. If you scroll further down on that Patriot screen, you can download that RockSim file as well. Next. All right, so moving on to fly sheets. So you've begun your RockSim, you've started running your simulations. What does it mean? What am I looking for? What am I trying to do in simulations? There's the performance targets. There's an altitude that your rocket needs to reach, but there's a few other metrics in your simulations that you need to perform as well, such as you have to have a thrust to weight ratio greater than 5. You have to make sure that your speed is acceptable. There's all these performance parameters. Your descent rate has to be acceptable in simulation. And the fly sheets will tell you that which performance parameters to look for in your simulations. So you'll download the fly sheet template. And I think Rob's going to put it in the chat, maybe, or Connie. And then at each milestone, you're just going to fill out more of it. So hopefully by CDR in a couple weeks, you could fill out maybe half of the fly sheet you understand, and then we'll give you feedback, we'll give you corrections. And then the next milestone at FR 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, we'll give you some more feedback. So hopefully you want to complete your fly sheet by FR at the latest and understanding all of those flight performance parameters. Next. And just to show you where it is, you'll go in the first station's launch report templates and scores. And then notice there's a gateway column. So the first column is kind of where you're going to find all these fly sheets. You're gonna upload your RockSim virtual PowerPoints and whatnot. Next. All right, so more about the fly sheet. Like I mentioned, there's some performance parameters. So you can see kind of an example of the performance parameters here. You need to tell us what your manufacturer of your kit is. So you would put in Lock Precision Patriot or Lock Precision Phantom. The total rocket length. So again, you can get this from the vendor website. You could get that length from your RockSim file. Airframe diameter. Again, you'll have in the RockSim file, you'll have the diameter of the rocket and providing all that information. So as you fill out the fly sheet, it kind of just tells us that you know how to work RockSim, that you know that you've been to the vendor's website, that you understand kind of what the rocket is made out of. There's also motor properties. And again, you will go to thrustcurve.org to get a lot of these motor properties and put them in there as well, selecting those motors. And then stability, recovery. There's a few other parameters. This isn't the complete sheet. This is just a screenshot of the top half of the fly sheet. Next. All right, so your virtual presentations. So you've done your simulations, you filled out your rock sim, your fly sheet, so you understand the performance, and now you need to present all that information to us. So at CDR and FR, you'll give a virtual presentation to the tech team of your status. So please, one note, please wait until your first milestone to begin your procurements. So it's a couple weeks from now, we're going to give you kind of a yay or nay. We'll give you a thumbs up or give you some feedback on your selections, whether it's a kit, a motor, altimeter, parachutes, whatnot you have chosen. So don't dive right in. We've had teams kind of not select the right components, and you'll end up wasting money if you don't purchase the right thing, right? And we don't want that. We don't want to waste money. We don't want to waste resources or time here. Your virtual presentation can also be considered practice because on launch weekend, your team's going to give a presentation in front of the entire Gateway, audience, all of the teams and students and anyone in attendance. So these two virtuals are kind of practice for that final presentation on launch weekend. Like I mentioned, myself and Frank will be there from the FNL tech team to give you feedback. And then we will also have some native engineering professionals to give you some feedback on your presentation style. Next. So again, just like the fly sheet, you're going to download a virtual template for your presentation on the website. Same link, same page. We saw the column. We go to the next page here. Right, so just a different location. You're going to download that CDR virtual PowerPoint and fill that out and submit that on January 27th. Next. And let more, I think one final slide, just talking about virtual presentations. There's about 10 slides in the presentation, and you will present for 15 minutes. So you'll fill out the content of the slide. It's pretty straightforward, plug and chug. You just kind of read the slide and what it asks for and put those parameters. So maybe you're going to summarize your simulations. You're going to talk about the kit you selected. You're going to talk about your motor selection and why you chose that motor. You'll talk a bit about your altimeters, your avionics selections. You'll talk about your recovery selections. So at CDR, hopefully you have those. If not, we'll provide some guidance and then you'll just submit them in the following presentation. Next. All right, so we're halfway through. Moving on to project management. So hopefully that was a good start, good guidance into what to expect for Gateway. Now we're going to talk a bit about project management and why it's a big part of success. And we've seen teams that usually struggle with the project management side of the competition, which is a number of things, right? It's scheduling, it's budgeting, it's procurement, it's training, it's simulations, it's testing and requirements. Next. So we'll specifically talk a bit about scheduling and budgeting as they are applicable to Gateway. These are kind of the basics that you're going to use. We provide as much guidance as possible. If you do graduate on to Moon and Mars, they also do scheduling and budgeting, but they're a lot more self-sufficient because, they've kind of been doing this. Their experienced team's been doing this for a while. They create their own budgets and their own schedules, and they submit that as well. You will need to create an update and submit a schedule. It's important to have a plan of attack, subtasks to achieve the goal. Again, the template is in the same spot as before. I think we have a slide here to show you. And you'll begin with your 3 milestones. So we talked about 2 milestones. You have a CDR, you have an FR. You also have launch weekend, right? So that's kind of your last milestone, really. There is a post-launch assessment as well, which is your 4th milestone. And maybe we'll talk about that in the handbook, but some more guidance for that. But in between those milestones, right, I believe the milestones are spread out every 4 to 5 weeks. You should have tasks assigned or goals, every week, kind of deciding what you want to do for that week to help you get to the next milestone. Next. So we'll see some examples here. So for students, right, just going week by week. So just in the spreadsheet format, right, listing the Monday, January 1st or 6th or whatever it is in week 1 to 3. You can see you have 18 weeks between kickoff and launch weekend. So the students, for example, if you're a student, maybe you have training in the first 6 weeks. Maybe you're going to focus on training, whether it's simulation training, maybe it's CAD work training, maybe it's a machine shop. Maybe you got a machine shop at your school you need to go take some training for to be able to access. Things like that. You're gonna set those in your schedule. that you want to do training, or the entire team needs to focus on training for X number of weeks. Maybe you need to work on simulations, right? And simulations should run from week 1 all the way to launch weekend. Basically, you should always be refining your simulation to accurately represent what you build, what you plan to build, making sure it's refined all the way through. So start your simulations early. They should be started already. Component selections is also a big one. So understanding what you need to research and what you need to select early on. So don't just make arbitrary selections and go buy them tomorrow. You want to spend maybe, the first 6 weeks up to CDR you see there. Just, researching components, whether it's altimeters or GPS or parachutes. See what's out there and look at the prices and performance and figure out which one do we want. It's not always the most expensive option that's the best option, right? And you're going to have to balance your schedule with what you want versus your budget as well. And then also procurement, right? So maybe your procurements don't start till after CDR. We mentioned wait until your first review, and we'll give you the green light to go ahead with procurements. So your procurement window, right? And notice procurement window doesn't run all the way to launch weekend. You want to finish your procurements before launch weekend so that everything arrives, you can put it all together and test it prior to launch weekend. And then assembly and fabrication, right, is another part of the schedule. So just sort of decide when you want to fill those out. And then you can further break down all of these tasks as well in your schedule. Next. And then more just as an advisor, right? Advisor may have different tasks than the student. The advisor may be focused on recruiting students for the first 6 weeks. And then, procuring RockSim maybe a couple weeks, right? At the start, the advisors and mentors should be helping to get the resources for the team to meet, right? Getting a room on campus booked for recurring meetings, getting access to computer labs or software that the team may need. Even just managing the team meetings, right? That's part of the advisor's responsibility, or the team lead. Gathering resources, again, so getting access to the shop or any supplies or equipment that the students need to build the rocket is the advisor's responsibility. And then assisting with procurements as well. So the advisor is going to be the focal point, because the FNL grant goes to the advisor. So the students will come to the advisor and say, hey, these are things we want to buy. So it's the advisor that's kind of that point for the school to go and make all those purchases. And then assisting with travel as well for launch weekend. Next. All right, moving on to budgeting. You will also need to create, update, and submit a budget. It's important to have a plan to optimize your budget. Again, there's a budget template on the website, and you're going to split your budget basically among 3 divisions. You kind of got 3 things you're looking at for this project. You got your rocket and supplies, so all the components that go into the rocket. You're going to have your supplies, which is different than the rocket, right? Supplies could be, hey, we need latex gloves to do epoxy steps, or we need to purchase epoxy, or maybe we need to purchase PPE. We need to purchase eye goggles or a face shield or something, right? You need to think of all these things ahead of time and have them in your budget for supplies. Even the simulation software is going to cost you money. So remember to allocate for that simulation software in your budget. And then your third item is basically your travel. It's your trip to launch weekend. So you're going to split up your budget, and maybe you put 33% into each bucket, right? So you decide to spend a third of your budget on rocket and parts, a third of your budget on supplies, and a third of your budget on travel. And then your budget helps us to ensure that you are purchasing the correct components. So that's kind of why you submit it to us. It keeps you on track, but also helps us, we can review it and make sure that you are making the right selections. Next. And just an example of the budget. So again, you'll see this when you download the budgeting project management template on the website. So again, your categories, right? Rocket, supplies, and travel. And then just listing out the items. So for CDR, in 2 weeks, when you fill out the budget, it doesn't need to be super detailed, right? You could just have the buckets kind of filled out. Maybe you got an estimate of, hey, we want to spend $200 on a rocket, and we want to spend $400 on electronics, right? So you may not have a manufacturer or vendor listed yet. You could put an example or notes, right? You could put what you plan to do, and then kind of just ballparking and say estimates, right? But then even, it's not shown here, but in the template itself will be a status column. And then the keeping track of that status column helps you, determine, hey, is this part been ordered, or is this part shipping? Is this part received? Is this part on hand? Did we forget to order something? So that's kind of the budgeting, helps you with procurements as well. Next. And again, to find this template, it's the same sheet as the schedule, and it's highlighted there. And I think that's out of date. It says budget on the screen, but it'll say PM template on the website. Next. So component selection, just some tips. Again, if you're new to rocketry, you may be kind of struggling, thinking, hey, what do I need to look at? When you go and buy a rocket kit, it doesn't come with everything. It comes it's the shell. It's like I said, it's maybe 60% complete. You need to go and research altimeters, your avionics, and you need to purchase those separately. You need to purchase switches separately, and you need to also purchase a GPS tracking separately. Those do not come with the kit. So someone on your team could be assigned just as the avionics expert, right? So that's a little bit more to project management. Someone's in charge of the team, someone's in charge of avionics. They're going to look at those and research those three components. And we do have an avionics webinar coming up next week. So if you're new to avionics, or you're someone from your team, hopefully we'll come to that, learn a little bit more about avionics. Also have recovery. You're going to need to purchase a drogue parachute and a main parachute. A lot of kits, they'll come with a parachute, but usually you have to change the size of the parachute. It's kind of the wrong size based on the performance we're expecting. So we want someone on your team to also be in charge of recovery, to understand how to simulate a drogue parachute and find a descent rate, and as well as a main parachute and additional hardware. There's a lot of additional hardware that goes into recovery, such as shock cords, parachute protectors, quick links. And we do have a recovery webinar, I think, in a couple weeks as well. So we'll send out the links to the Gateway teams, make sure someone from your team attends that as well. And then motor retention, of course, you need to buy a motor retainer. Don't forget this one. A lot of teams, or some teams in the past, have shown up to launch weekend without a motor retainer. And it's understandable if you're new to rocketry, you don't understand that the motor, there's a device that keeps the motor inside the rocket, and it's called the motor retainer. And if it's not there, basically after the motor burns out, that there's a casing that'll just fall out of the rocket. And it's a safety hazard, safety risk of falling on the crowd that's below the rocket. So those are a couple of things you need to keep an eye out for in your component selections. Next. And then procurements. So we also provide you a list of a tip sheet here for procurements. It's kind of just a list of kit manufacturers. You can see the first two there. Lock Precision's our Gateway kits. If you just want to look at other kits, Wildband may actually sell the Lock Precision kits, so you don't need to buy directly from the manufacturer. You could buy from a third-party vendor or distributor as well. So maybe there's a rocketry vendor closer to you that carries the Lock Precision kits. So keep that in mind as well. Other vendors as well, Chris's Rocketry. Vendors kind of usually sell a little bit of everything. So maybe they'll sell kits, maybe they'll sell altimeters, maybe they'll sell recovery hardware. So check out those, especially in the states that are in your area. Apogee Components sells altimeters and GPS tracking. Off We Go Rocketry, Bay Area Rocketry. So just some places to go to examine your components to get an idea of what you can buy and the cost of items. So again, when you download your budget, your PM template from the website, you'll get this list. You'll be able to click those links and go to those pages. Next. Some other tips. The Tripoli Rocketry Association website also has some resources there. You can see they list a bunch of manufacturers and they list a bunch of vendors for different components. So if you're the recovery person or your team or the avionics person, go check out the Tripoli Rocketry Association website to get ideas of where to go and look at these components. Next. All right, finally, requirements. So why what are we expected to do, right? We do simulations, we fill out a fly sheet, we give a presentation, we've researched some components so we know what altimeters we want, we've researched some parachutes, we select that all. But in the end, all of this is going to come together, and it's going to and you're going to have to meet some requirements, right? These are all outlined in the handbook. So don't worry about the other project management items at the start of this section, right? We listed other things like testing and requirements verification and whatnot. Those are the more advanced concepts that you'll see in Moon and Mars if you get once your team graduates onto Moon and Mars. But for now in Gateway, we want you to just get a good grasp on scheduling, good grasp on budgeting, and a good grasp on procurements. So performance requirements are listed in the handbook, like I mentioned, and we're going to verify these performance requirements are met by examining your fly sheet and your rock sim at each of your milestones. Next. So challenge requirements, and we'll list some of them here. Your rocket is restricted, of course, to the 3 rockets in the handbook. They change every year. So don't think that, hey, I already know the rockets because we saw the handbook last year. The kits change every year. So make sure to go back to the handbook and look up the new kits for 2025. And the motors also change every year. So your motors are restricted to the 6 in the list. Don't think you could just go pick some arbitrary motor and make that work for your competition. Altitude requirements for Gateway. Your rocket needs to fly to a range between 2,200 and 2,800 feet AGL, which stands for above ground level. So in simulation, of course, you're going to try and get your simulator rocket to get to that range, and then in the actual flight, your altimeters will measure your altitude above the ground. Next. Some other general requirements, and again, there's a lot more than the one shown on the screen, so make sure you go through the handbook and understand all the requirements. You have to have a minimum of 1 altimeter, even though 2 are suggested. 2 provides redundancy. So if there's some problem with your altimeter, it's defective, or maybe something got broken in testing, maybe your wire came loose, maybe your battery's power got dropped too low, right? You kind of want a redundant system, a second altimeter on a separate circuit to back up the first altimeter. Other requirements, you have to have a minimum static margin of 1. So you'll figure that out in RockSim in simulation, what the static margin is and how to get it to 1 or greater. Minimum rail exit velocity of 52 feet per second. And again, that's a simulation parameter you'll get out of RockSim when you perform your simulations. Like I mentioned, minimum thrust to weight ratio of 5 to 1. You calculate this. This isn't given in RockSim. It's a calculation by hand. You're going to take your motor thrust and divide it by your gross rocket weight. So if your motor thrust is 100 pounds of force, your rocket weighs 10 pounds, and then your thrust to weight ratio is 10 to 1. And then your final motor selection is due February 17th. I believe that's correct, Rob. I think that's from the calendar.
Yep, that's still same day.
Next. Recovery requirements. Like I mentioned, you need to have 2 parachutes. You're going to have a drogue and a main. Your drogue is selected such that the rocket descends at 45 to 65 feet per second from apogee. And again, this is determined in simulation. So as you go in your RockSim simulations and you change the parachute and you select a smaller or bigger parachute, you're going to see that the descent rate changes. And you just want that upper descent rate. And it needs to be between 45 and 65. Notice your drogue parachute must sit in the booster section of the rocket. So when we remember our 2D image, it's the smaller parachute, but it sits towards the motor side, towards the fin side. And you must also use a backup motor ejection. So when you construct your rocket, make sure not to put a bulkhead in front of the motor, between that motor and the parachute, because there's a device or an ejection charge in the motor that'll help to ensure that your drogue parachute is deployed from the rocket. Main parachute requirements, you selected such that your rocket descends when it touches the ground at a maximum of 20 feet per second at touchdown. So again, you're going to go into RockSim, you're going to change the size of the parachute, bigger, smaller, whatnot, and then it's going to tell you what the descent rate is when it touches the ground. And then also your main parachute must sit in the sustainer section. Next. Resources. I think we're there. 45 minutes. Good, good. All right. So please reach out to the following in the suggested order. Um, of course, your team advisor should be the first ask whether you're struggling with, hey, I don't know how to get RockSim. You'll ask your advisor, say, hey, advisor, FNL's telling me I need to get RockSim. Can you help me figure out how to get RockSim? If you need a meeting space, if you need, PowerPoint, if you need access to, maybe you don't have Microsoft Word on your computer or PowerPoint or whatnot, right? Anything you need, kind of go to your team advisor first. Most non-technical or resource issues should be addressed with your team advisor first. Your next resource is your rocketry mentor. So many veteran teams who've been there before. We all know you have rocketry mentors in the community or in a neighborhood near you, close by. So maybe you've got a question on maybe your RockSim's not running properly, or you don't know how to find the descent rate in RockSim. Your first resource is to reach out to your rocketry mentor. So shoot them an email. Maybe you invite your rocketry mentor to your weekly meetings. You set up a Zoom call so your mentor can join and you can ask your mentor these questions. We want you to be as self-sufficient or self-sustaining as possible. So those are your first two resources that we want you to go to. If your advisor and if your mentor are unavailable or can't answer the question properly, and then your third option, of course, is to come to the FNL admin team. You're going to come to Rob Cannon. You're going to shoot Rob an email, and Rob can either set up office hours, if it's going to take an hour to discuss something or it's a little bit complicated situation, or just quick questions. If you're like, hey, I don't know how to do this in RockSim, or hey, I got a question about a form or something like that, shoot a message to Rob Cannon. He'll redirect your question as needed. So whether the question needs to go to Connie or needs to go to me or Frank, Rob's the point person for that. And I believe that's it. Any questions? I see we had some late joiners. I don't know if we're doing attendance or not.
David or Tyler, any questions?
We put your name and school in the chat as well.
Hi. Yeah, Tyler here from United Tribes. Sorry, I had a class till 4:20 here local time. But anyway, so yeah, I did miss at the beginning, but I see this is being recorded. So will the recordings be posted somewhere that I can review?
Yep, we'll have them posted to the website probably tonight, if not early tomorrow. So I'm just grabbing the link for it. So it's in the tips and tricks section of the website. We have a whole section of webinars and everything is posted there. So you have the PowerPoint and the recording.
Okay. Thank you so much. I will take a look at that.
Thanks for joining, Tyler. Thanks, David. Hey, David. Thanks for joining. David got any questions?
I don't think so.
There's a little bit new, right? I mean, most of it's the same as before. We just kind of refined it and provide a little bit more guidance this time around for Gateway. Some things are new, like I think we've added some more presentations for Gateway at FR and post-launch. After launch weekend, we're going to do another presentation for Gateway. But even just the new thing this year, that budget and the scheduling template. So we want you to fill that out and submit it back to us as well. So that's new for this year and new for Gateway only. And it's kind of because, like I said, we've seen the teams that do well tend to do, have good budgets and good scheduling. And the teams that struggle have been struggling basically with the scheduling and the budgets. So we want to be able to monitor that and provide feedback for your budget and your schedules.
So please let us know if the templates are working or, if we're missing a little something that could help the teams a little more.
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, if there are no other questions, stop recording.